Giving feedback. Common pitfalls in practice include, we don't want to belittle, but we also don't want to sugarcoat our feedback to our students. The feedback sandwich. So, hey, you did a great job. Oh, by the way, you could have done this a little better. And oh, remember, great job. We don't want to do that. We don't want to compliment, provide some bad news or something they didn't do well, and then sandwich it again with a compliment because it makes it's easier to do. An alternative example is to identify a positive observation, an area for improvement based on the observation, and then negotiate a goal with your learner. So additional recommended methods. So Dr. Jenny Rudolph and colleagues, including our own Dr. Walter Epic, published an article titled Debriefing as Formative Assessment, Closing the Performance Gaps in Medical Education. So in this article, they describe a model where you establish a frame, observe performance, and there will be an actual actions versus desired actions. And you see this in the diagram here. The goal is to narrow the gap between the actual actions versus the desired actions. So another way to think about this is the perspective that setting expectations, performances, and feedback are all interrelated and interconnected. And each gear drives the wheel for the next. So if we clearly set expectations to the learner will know what to do, how to do it, and then when we observe them, we can anchor our feedback based on how well they did it. And that's where you can still get at closing the gap based on your feedback. So how can we apply this in the teaching selective? The M4s and you will receive a teaching checklist. We use this checklist to anchor our feedback to the M4s who are teaching. This is the expectations for the teaching encounter, and we'll take a closer look so we're not looking at a death by PowerPoint slide. So setting expectations. Look for students who clearly explain the process of learning activity or the session to the juniors. Look for if they've explained the expectations to the learners, if they've told them why it was important. This is really important for adult learners. So we want to explain the rationale for why we're doing things. And if it's possible to determine if they adjusted or took into consideration the level of their learner. Over the years, I've watched a number of these videos, and most of the Feinberg students do really well with communication skills. Sometimes you see students who use their hands in a distracting way, or they say the or one year a graduate had said, that guy, and they kept referring to the patient or the standardized patient as that guy. So those are things that I doubt you'll see the majority of, but they're fair game to comment on. So if there's any distractors, you're going to see it, they're going to see it, and you can talk about it. The big takeaway in this section, I think, is engaging the learner under communicating effectively. So did they include the juniors into the learning opportunity, and all of them? So in the Clinical Skills Center, often you'll see one student performing and there's a group of other students standing around watching. So did the senior student ask or assign roles to the other students so that they all had something to do during the encounter and they weren't drifting off while the one was performing? So I've seen this done where some students will assign feedback roles. And if you see that, that's a great example of engagement. Did they ask the whole group questions, or did they only ask questions of the individual who was performing at that particular time? And did they listen and adjust based on the needs of the students? So if the students kind of asked a question that they weren't anticipating, did they adjust to that? So the most important thing in the feedback session, the one thing I'd like you to remember is, did the fourth year ask their junior for a self-assessment before they told them what they did right or what they could improve on? This is really important because this gets at This gives a teacher information to understand the motivators of a behavior. So what we see, similar to an iceberg, is above the waterline is behavior. Below the waterline is a motivating driver. So we want to figure out as a teacher what the motivating drivers are, and we want to narrow them or correct them. So by asking for a self-assessment up front gives us information. If we receive superficial information, we can probe and just say, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because that will give us more information to determine if we need to correct behavior, or if it's a knowledge deficit, or what is the real problem. So people do things for logical reasons. Sometimes they're just not the right reasons. So focus in on looking at if the fourth year asked the junior for a self-assessment. Did they provide the learner, or did they probe for rationale if they were given a superficial answer? Otherwise, were they specific in their feedback? Did they identify a positive or an area for improvement without giving them a laundry list of things to improve on? Did they provide an example for how to improve? So when I was at your stage of training, this is what I did. That's, a lot of times norm referencing, but it helps. Did they provide a take-home message, and did they negotiate a goal? So you might not get all these categories, but if they at least do a couple of these, it's good. And the one thing I would stress again is asking the learner for their own self-assessment first. So under the knowledge integration and application, this is really to see if they're helping their junior connect content from this course to other courses. So did they highlight a basic science principle in a clinical context? That it's really important to help them develop the integration that they're going to need to help them transfer to clinical sciences. So practice recommendations. Set expectations. Observe and focus on desired performance behaviors. Ask the learner for their own self-assessment. The next few slides show some examples of asking for a self-reflection. One way is to just start the conversation by saying, what were your strengths and why? Then what were your areas of improvement and why? In between, there will be discussion and possibly probing for answers to get, if you're given a superficial response. And the last step is to negotiate a goal for the next learning opportunity. Another example is the model for giving feedback is the advocacy inquiry model. In this model, you state what you saw, what you witnessed, observed, and you state your point of view, followed by your perspective with an open-ended question to see why the learner performed what they did. This gets at, again, the self-assessment. Here is some of the ways to go about using this model. So the observation, the objective data would include, I noticed that, I saw that, I heard you say, etc. The point of view, I liked that you sat down with Mrs. Jones and held her hand when we were delivering the bad news. I thought it was interesting when I was worried or concerned when you did X. Another one that I use is perception and intent. I heard you say X. It gives me the perception of, was this your intent? That opens up a dialogue a lot of times with professionalism type issues. So in summary, if we set expectations clearly, we observe, focus on behaviors at a desired level of performance, we ask the learner for their own self-assessment, we probe for motivators if necessary, and then we discuss the goals for future encounters. That is an excellent model for feedback. So assessments. The students are required to complete the checklist and a self-assessment of their performance and turn in their completed checklist and self-assessment by the end of the rotation. So the self-assessment that the student is supposed to turn in is the independent learning plan, as seen here in this slide. The independent learning contract asks for strengths, stating areas of improvement, crafting a goal, explaining how they will achieve the goal, so the resources and strategies used to achieve the goal, and explain how we will know that they achieved it, so the evidence. We ask that you complete a competency assessment form on each student's performance. We will email you this document, complete it and send it back to the course coordinator, and you will have her contact information or his contact information as well. So looking closer at the feedback competencies, the yellow highlighted area is the area that we expect students to be functioning at their level of training. So this is the benchmark for their level for this competency in this course. Focus your rating on the descriptors, statements such as consistently provides feedback that is specific, balanced, and actionable. If your observation fits within this descriptor, you would decide whether the student should receive a 7 or an 8 based on how strong of that they fit in within that descriptor. There is an open narrative box for every form at the end. So what they do, that there were positive observations and observations that are in need for improvement, and please be specific and provide a way to improve and possibly articulate the rationale for why this is important. The students use these narratives and review a summary of all of their ratings in a portfolio review. So this is very helpful for them in their development. So in summary, I hope that I've covered enough of the ABCs of the new vocabulary and context, and where to find more information. In providing feedback, ask the learner for their self-assessment first. Practice suggested techniques for giving feedback within the teaching selective, and apply these techniques within your clerkship as well. Student assessment form, the competency rating form, focus on the anchors for the competency standard that we're asking you to assess, and their benchmarks and whether they fit within that or not. Be specific. Anchor your feedback to the observed behaviors. State a way to improve. And contact me with any questions at any time, and have fun. If you're interested in more teaching opportunities, please contact me. I'm happy to meet with you. There's opportunities in the clinical skills settings. There's opportunities in PBL. And thank you very much.